Madeline here from Forward Spine Center, and one of the most popular questions I get is, what's the best shoe for me? So today I'm here with Sam at TC Running in Maple Grove, and he's going to answer a few questions that we often get in clinic. So Sam, what is the most popular running shoes right now?
Yeah, so I was going to say, like, if we're going based off kind of pure sales numbers, Brooks Ghost and the Hoka Clifton tend to kind of lead the way in that side.
Explain a little bit more about what's the big difference between those.
Yeah, so on paper, these are actually the same exact shoe. Like, if we were to boil it down to kind of just where they sit in the lineup, the specs that they have, these are the same shoe. Now, by looking at it, that's not necessarily the case, right? A little taller stack height out of the Hoka, a little lower profile of the Ghost, but just kind of what I've found, at least out of these two, I mean, Brooks and Hoka kind of for us just historically have been two kind of the more popular brands for us. That being said, now, is your foot, meant for a Hoka Clifton? Is it meant for a Ghost? Yes and no. So it's kind of a twofold question there on that side. But what Hoka really does is they have that taller stack height, just across all of their models, even there. That's kind of, a big piece that, we'll have customers walk in and just really see that cushion in there. Now, the Ghost is going to be in that similar cushion level, but a little lower profile. So that's kind of where preference comes in, at least between these two. So someone might like a little taller, off the ground, softer feel out of the Clifton. Someone might want that a little more grounded. I like using the word responsive. That makes sense, just kind of feeling the ground a little more. That's great. Both are great shoes. Both are going to get done what you need to, but just kind of, different way of getting the job done.
And you can get both of these in the wide toe?
Absolutely, yep. Okay. And so actually when it comes to wide widths now, generally, so if I grabbed a wide width in this Ghost, we don't actually change the left-right width of it. We just add more material around the top. So that's kind of where it even comes into play with different models. So, I mean, let's take Hoka, for example. We look at the bottom of this Mach here versus compare it to the bottom of this Bondi. See how that's even just a wider base than the Clifton, too. So it even just depends on the model in particular, because I may need a wide in this, but may just go to regular in that one.
And that would play a role if someone has like a bunion, or if they have like flatter feet, would they want maybe a wider toe?
Yes, could be. Yep. I mean, again, that shape of foot is really something that we really take into account when we're kind of doing our fitting processes. Do we need a little straighter last? That's kind of the vocab word for having a wider base on there. But again, even with a bunion, we might need to go to that wide width too, just to give yourselves a little bit more material kind of around the top of the foot.
But even like a trigger toe.
Yeah.
Like, would that be someone who would want like maybe a wider Ghost?
Yep, absolutely. Yep, just to give you a little bit more room in that kind of in the front of the foot. Absolutely. So, yeah.
Okay. And then how about we talk a little bit more about, like, do they both have a zero drop? Or what's the difference between like a 5 millimeter drop or a 7 millimeter drop? Like, why would you look for that? Yeah,
so really when it comes to drops, so Brooks is going to be a 12. This Ghost is going to be a 12 millimeter drop. This is a 5 millimeter drop. Can't really tell that just by looking at it. And what that just refers to is how tall the heel, this part of the shoe, is, what that offset difference is between the heel and the toe. So it's 12 millimeters higher in the heel, than the toe. That on theirs, and then same
and like
there.
Ultras is a zero drop.
Correct. Yep. So it's completely flat from that heel to toe in there. Yep.
And is that just preference?
A little bit of preference in there. It does change. I mean, we've got opposite ends of the spectrum here with these two. It does change some things biomechanically with that arch ankle, kind of where that heel's landing on the ground. So obviously a taller drop per se is going to allow us to have a little bit more of that forefoot action in there. Flatter shoe per se might tend to lead more with that heel, like coming through our gait cycle, if that makes sense.
And that's really important. Like, you watch people run, so if you notice like they're maybe placing a little bit more stress into their heel versus into their toes, you can watch and see like maybe you want a higher heel or
and part of that too is just kind of comes from trying them on. I don't personally use heel toe offset as like a big make or break when we're kind of especially getting started into there. I always kind of like to start out with like 4 or 5 different shoes that kind of cover a wide variety of bases. And then we kind of fine tune is what I like to say. Just kind of go, based on what we think of this platter of 4 shoes, then I can kind of fine tune things based on, our preference on like underfoot feel, shape, that whole setup too.
So one of the other questions is like, what's the latest research, new technology? And right now I have a Topo
shoe
versus an Ultra, which are both kind of more zero drop or
Correct.
5mm drop.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit more about the latest research?
Yeah, absolutely. So what Topo's doing with their foot shape, if I can seal these from you here. So again, both are employing kind of that foot-shaped toe box, essentially. You can even just see by looking at it on the bottom. Topo does bow out a little bit on that big toe side, as you can kind of tell looking at those as well. So that's kind of been one difference between these two. Topo also, you know, generally speaking across some of their models, hugs that midfoot a little differently too, versus Ultra stays, you know, generally speaking, a little bit wider throughout that whole base. Topo's just got a different shape where it just kind of maybe hugs that midfoot, hugs that heel a little differently. So again,
is there a reason for that, or is there?
It's just kind of just that's the brand's way of doing it, essentially. Okay. You know, that's just kind of that shape of shoe across the board. I would say as far as, you know, technology wise go, again, just that lower drop does kind of help more that natural movement of the foot per se, but again, I'm going to kind of go back to that. That might not be for everyone.
Well, and it's such a big change for some people.
Yep.
You know, I think the more that I've researched is like the only way to strengthen a tendon is to load it. And so like getting the toes being used also provides a lot of stability.
Yes.
But a lot of people aren't used to it.
Exactly. Yep. And maybe some people need those like with like a Morton's neuroma or some like tendonitis in the toe. They might need their toes to be not moving at all on that flip side. So again, that's just kind of coming in, seeing us and saying, you know, here's what I've been dealing with, and then we can kind of help quantify all that stuff for you, translate that into a footwear.
And you can't reverse an arthritic foot.
Not necessarily. No.
So it's finding the right shoe to support it.
Exactly.
What's the rule for new shoes? When do you need new shoes?
Yeah.
What signs?
So I always like tracking mine with miles. Personally. Yep. So right around kind of that 400, 450 mark is where I kind of start to pay attention to things like, okay, my knee's a little more sore after my run that day, or maybe my calves are a little more sore after that. Those are kind of, for me, after, you know, going through shoes for a couple of years now, that's just kind of those little points that I kind of like start to pay attention to. So miles is kind of that first piece that I like to use in there.
Before you even have knee pain or foot pain.
Yep. And then again, visual wear is, it can work, but again, just that foam is compressing over and over, and we can't always see that, right? Because there's so much going on inside that shoe, and all that foam compressing over time, we might not be able to see that. And again, visually too, with the tread, with that blown rubber on the bottom, that's, again, everyone's wearing their shoes differently too. So, you know, again, it's a good aid in there, but at the end of the day, I'd say miles is kind of our first, you know, point of, you know, first metric to kind of really know when it's time to replace that.
And a lot of the apps that you use, you can probably calculate the miles.
Yeah. I mean, if you're running with a smartwatch, I mean, you got your phone and you know how far you're running every time. Yeah. So just keep track of it that way. And then, like I said, once we're starting to kind of get around, for me, kind of that 400 mile mark, I've kind of, you know, plus minus, you know, 350 to 450 is kind of that window of things, just because, again, we're all wearing our shoes differently. So
what's a common mistake that you see in runners? If there's one thing that you would like to like preach.
I'd say first thing is when they first come into our store, I call it window shopping. They're picking things off the wall. It's like, this color looks great. This shoe looks cool. Great. I'm like, I want my shoe to look cool as much as the next person. Don't get me wrong. However, there's such a plethora, like even within a brand like Hoka, New Balance, Nike, whatever, they're all doing things differently for our foot. You know, it's kind of almost one of each action. So me putting on a New Balance, that's not going to be the same, you know, across the board, if that makes sense for you. So I always just like to tell people, like, let's do that gait analysis. Let's see how that arch ankle is moving, and then find that big picture category. And then we can just kind of play around, just kind of dial in on that specific fit for you personally. Because, I mean, shoe shopping already is hard enough as is. So we just want to do anything that we can do to kind of help personalize that fit and kind of guide you down the right path. That's the main thing on there. So again, we can always find cool colors in that shoe for you, but, you know, let's get that fit down first.
And so come in and get it evaluated, because a lot of times what you think you're doing or what you think you need is not maybe how your ankle's moving or how you're
and then add size into the equation too. Like in my dress shoes, I wear an 8.5. My running shoes, I wear a 9.5 for all that. And even in like my trail running shoes, when I do some of these longer distances, I go up to a 10 sometimes, and that's so much variance in there. So anything, you know, we just need to just get you all in one spot and just try things on side by side. And that's really the what's nice about us being here is we can just
Exactly.
get you down in one spot and just be able to do it all right out in front of you, rather than trying to pick around and guess, essentially.
Well,
On
thank
that.
you, Sam. Thanks
Yeah,
for your time and thanks for your
absolutely.
insight.
You got it.
If anyone has any questions, pop into TC Running in Maple Grove. Dr. Madeline here at Ford Spine Center. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your health journey.